All right, excellent afternoon to all those who are watching me across the states in Nigeria. One thing is harnessing, will I say, resources. Another angle is managing resources. So if both are not harnessing and, will I say, management of resources are not well planned or implemented, the purpose becomes defeated. So tax reform policies are about income generation. I want to believe that we're all here today to have this interesting edition of Real Talk with Kike. I remain your convener, Kike Atanda-Owo. I think it's important for us to hear what On This Day initial segment asks for us. So when I return, I give my submission on it. Stay with me, I'll be right back. All right, many thanks for staying with me. My takeaway from On This Day initial segment today just is a reflection of my opening statement on the show about managing our resources in our country, or in this country, Nigeria. Yes, we had oil boom and there was too much money in our hands as a country. If we had used our oil wealth judiciously, I believe that we wouldn't have found ourselves in the mess of corruption, refineries going on borrowed and having to borrow money every now and then. So it's not too late to take the direction of reformation, if you ask me. I think that's my takeaway from On This Day initial segment. And before I get a quick message from my sponsor, let me quickly make a shout out to my floor manager, Eno, who took the time out to beautify this set this morning swiftly. Eno and Messi did a wonderful job. Guys, can you see that I'm not in a festive mood right now? Yes, I'm in a festive mood. And to all those my technical directors staring at me from the glass room, Mr. Sunday. Guys, we need to be serious. Mr. Sunday Akobo, you know what? And Messi did a fantastic job. Thank you, Eno. Thank you. You did a job of a floor manager today, and I must give you your kudos. I must give you your flowers. Thank you so much. I think it's important for us to go on a quick break now and get a word from my sponsors. When I return, the conversation will continue. Stay with me. I'll be right back. All right, many thanks for staying with me. The Nigerian Senate on Thursday resumed its debate on the tax reform bills, a set of 4 legislative proposals to increase the value-added tax VAT distributed to the national government to 55% while reducing the federal government share to 10%. And the new legislative regimes also propose zero VAT on exports and essential consumption by the masses, and grants of inputs in terms of VAT credit on assets and services in addition to goods consumed by businesses to lower the cost of production. Today, I'm focusing on a topic at the heart of Nigeria's economic discourse in terms of tax reforms and their implications on equity, revenue generation, and of course the everyday realities of Nigerians. And as the government pushes forward with new tax reform bills aimed at increasing revenue, questions are being raised about the fairness of these measures, their potential to attract or deter investors, and how they will impact businesses and citizens alike. Are we striking the right balance between revenue collection and economic growth is the question I'm asking. Are these policies equitable across across the diverse regions of Nigeria, or do they risk widening existing disparity? These are conversations I will be having with my guests before we delve into the main conversation before we delve into the last segment of the show. I think it's important for us to get the profile of my guest, and when I return, we'll dive straight to him and hear his own perspective on the issue at hand. Stay with me. I'll be right back. Many thanks for staying with me. Let me use this opportunity to quickly usher in my guest again, Dr. Muda Yusuf. Thank you so much for creating time to do this with me. It's a pleasure to have you again on Real Talk with Kike, and thank you for always obliging to my invitation. How are you doing today, sir?
Thank you very much. I'm fine, and I love your studio. And I love the...
Thank you so much. We are in the festive season, and I cannot wait to just take that break. Yes. And I could see, it seems as if your background, do you have something that has to do with...
I'm trying to emulate you, but...
Right, I'm following your footstep, rather. Anyway, let's dive straight to the topic at hand, But many thanks to my floor manager, for doing this swiftly. But quickly, my first question to you right now, based on the discourse that has been out there in the last 48 or 72 hours, our country has always had issues with revenue, and even when we ramp up, revenue generation, our corruption, I stay real on this platform, our corruption eats off a good chunk of what has been generated. Starting with our discussion right now, I believe that it's important for me to get an overview perspective of your thoughts on the tax reform bill that have raised debate from different quarters. What's your take on this thus far?
Well, my take is that, first of all, the tax bills are very, very good bills. They are excellent bills. The tax bills are coming with tax reforms that are long overdue. But unfortunately, we got ourselves into an unnecessary distraction, especially because of our, of getting involved in issues of revenue allocation formula. Because over the years, this has been a very, very sensitive issue. And I wish that the tax reform exercise hadn't dabbled into the issue of revenue allocation, because there are a lot of very, very important provisions in the tax reform bills. As the chairman of the committee said, we have over close to 200 provisions. And this single provision that has been generating all this controversy is just one. In fact, you can even say it's about half of one of the provisions, which has to do with VAT. And we have a lot more very, very important and very valuable provisions in the Act. So the distraction that it has generated is unfortunate, and it is highly disproportionate, in my view. And I think that if we have our way, we should step that down and move on with other very, very important provisions in the tax bill, so that we don't allow this small provision to truncate the entire exercise, around the around the tax reform. So we should not allow this small provision to truncate it. So that will be my take generally on the whole exercise.
Highlighting that, and I agree with you that we should move on to the important provision in the tax bill, because the chairman, the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee, that's Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, and the chairman, Federal Inland Revenue Service, that's Dr. Adedeji, that briefed the Senate on this reform, which captivated the minds of the panel, and I remember Senator Ali of Borno State, or South rather, that claimed that his problem was about the timing and the issue of derivation. What do you say, about the body language and the political undertones of the Senate to these reforms? And, and the reason why I'm asking this is because I would like to rub minds with you. What will be the outcome of of those who are opposing this tax reform bill?
Yes, first of all, I think we also need to understand where the northern constituency is also coming from. First, the current formula in the distribution of VAT is based on 50% equality of states, 30% population, and 20% derivation. And if you look at the northern part of the country, when you talk about population, they have an advantage. When you talk about equality of states, they are very comfortable with that. So out of these three parameters, two parameters account for 80%. And those two parameters are to their advantage. I'm talking now about equality of states, which is 50%, population, which is 30%. That is 80%. So you can now imagine how they will respond. If you now want to change those parameters to now give population 20%, equality of states 20%. That is where they are coming from. Because if you give this kind of allocation of 60% to derivation, there is no way that they will not feel shortchanged. Because you need to look at the capacity to consume across the country, either the capacity to consume or even the capacity to produce. So whichever way you look at it, if you are using the point of production as the basis of derivation, or you are using the point of consumption as the base of derivation, the purchasing power in the north, you cannot compare to the purchasing power in the south. The production capacity in the north, you can't compare to the production capacity in the south. So head or tail, if this formula is weighed heavily in favor of derivation, they are not likely to be in support of it. So that is why, in my view, this kind of contentious provision, we should just step it down and allow the sleeping dog to lie. Because we have more important things in the tax bills than this. Because this is a very serious distraction. Okay. So let's leave it and let us just allow the status quo to remain. Because what the committee was saying was that this is to favor even the North. And the North are saying that it's not favoring them. So if they say it's not favoring them, then let's leave it. Because the argument is that the current formula is favoring Lagos, is unduly favoring Rivers State, and so on. And they want to change it in their favor. And the argument is that they prefer the existing formula that weighs heavily on population, that weighs heavily on equality of states. And I think many of the states also will support that. So let's leave that and go to the other very important provision that will impact the economy. I mean, for instance, under the VAT thing, 5% of the VAT is being taken away from the federal to the states. That's a very good thing. It will help a lot of them, you know. And there are quite a number of other provisions also to support the private sector.
I think you've emphasized on what is important right now, but for the sake of balance, let's nudge the sentiment of the northerners for decrying the tax reforms. They may want to give concerns like lower rate of industrialization compared to the southern region, but the low income generation in the northern states, lesser access to ports and quite a lot that have been raised in the tax bill. Do they have genuine concerns? You think they have genuine concern? And if so, how does the new tax reform actually address their concerns? Because yes, at the town hall that I watched yesterday with one of my colleagues, Seun Okibaloye, where the one of the northern governors ran to say it was a wonderful, in his word that I'm quoting him now, in his word, it was a wonderful tax bill and all, but that most of them were not consulted enough for them to actually have that time to actually find a balance. What's your take on it with the new tax reform, highlighting this use of technology and third-party agent that they have used for the tax collection? Because critics also argue that involving consultants or third-party agents might lead to inefficiencies or conflicts, especially when harmonizing that revenue collection across agencies like FRS, customs and ports, which was part of the things that were highlighted yesterday that I watched. Do you think Nigeria has that institutional capacity to manage tax collection effectively without outsourcing it to third party? What role should technology play now in this process to ensure transparency and efficiency, sir?
Now, the chairman of the committee was very clear, and some of these things are also very clear in the bills. The whole system is now going to be heavily technology driven, and that's talking about bringing efficiency to tax administration. And once there is technology involvement and efficiency, all the leakages and corruption and all of that will be minimized. And I don't think anybody has any quarrels with that, Then, of course, there are also issues about the multiplicity of the taxes. We are talking about rationalizing the number of taxes. We have too many taxes. I don't think anybody has any quarrels with that. The governors who were complaining initially, they were talking about inadequate consultation. And I go back to this derivation thing. The main point they were raising has to do with the fact that the proposal about 60% derivation will be to the disadvantage of the North. That was the main argument. And it was felt that rather than go out there to the National Assembly, I've been arguing about these things, that further consultation should be undertaken, so that by the time it gets to the National Assembly, all this rancor and friction and noise and heat will not be there. That, for me, is what I think that is where they were coming from. But already the bills are already in the National Assembly. So taking it back and bringing it back again could be more rigorous. So the fact that these things are already in the National Assembly also provides the same opportunity for consultation. The chairman of the committee had made it very clear that theirs were just only proposals. They don't have the right to make laws. The power to make laws lies with the National Assembly. So all this heat and controversy are completely unnecessary. We have an avenue now to ventilate all of these things, whether you are talking about the governors or the northerners and whatever. We have an avenue. Some of these things eventually may be stepped down so that we can build consensus and make the whole process more inclusive. And I also know that they are likely to be pushed back. For instance, we have institutions like the TED Fund. TED Fund had a lot of impact. Even in our universities, there is no university you go, particularly federal and state public universities, you will see the presence of TED Fund. I'm talking of Tertiary Education Fund. It's very visible. The same thing with this NASENE. They are doing a lot now around technology, around innovation, because of the improved funding they have gotten. The same thing, we have something for the police trust fund. So the pushback that are likely to come from those areas is that if eventually, it may not be immediate according to the bill, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, this needs to be phased out so that everybody will go back to the budget. Some people are not comfortable with that. And I can also reason with them, because sometimes when you throw all the monies into the common pool and you ask people to come and present a budget, the money may not come back to you. That is from experience. We have had that kind of things. If it is coming directly to you from source, like the way it is now, you can be sure that you will get it. But if they say, okay, let everything go to the pool, then you submit your budget, then you bring it, now approval will be given, appropriation. We have had all sorts of issues with budget approval, releases, and all of it. So these are the fears that some people have. And we can allay the fears if you have sufficient framework to give them confidence that, yes, this thing will not unduly affect this institution. Because I know even the universities, I'm not sure they'll be comfortable with completely scrapping the tertiary education fund, because these are some of the things that resulted from agitation by ASU. So these are areas of conversation that we also need to further interrogate in the process of the public hearing.
I hear you, sir, and I know that there are many concerns, particularly from the northern states, about the proposed VAT increase, and its allocation. And many believe that the current system, is disappropriation, in terms of the favors that regions with corporate headquarters sit in Lagos, leaving others at a disadvantage. By which I can ask you this question about how government can address the regional disparity and ensure a more equitable distribution of tax revenues across the country. But you know what? We'll go on a quick break, and when I return, the conversation will continue, and I'll ask you this. Stay with me, I'll be right back. This is Real Talk with Kike. All right, glad to know you're still right there with us. In case you just joined today's live show, today is a compelling discussion about the Nigerian tax reform bill and their broader implication for equity, economic growth, and regional balance. And here with us is our esteemed guest, Dr. Muda Yusuf, the Director Chief Executive Officer at the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, that's CPPE, a highly respected finance and economic expert, I must emphasize. And together, we've been unpacking the critical aspect of these reforms, how they affect businesses, investors, and of course the average Nigerian citizen, and what must be done to ensure that these policies truly serve the nation's best interest. And I must say many thanks, Dr. Muda Yusuf, for all that you've shared thus far. It's been an interesting time with you. But let me use this opportunity to open the phone lines. For those who are watching right now, you want to be part of this conversation, it's important for you to call the number 081-188-88113. It's showing on your screen right now. And of course, we're streaming live on Facebook, only on Silverbird platform right now. Real Talk with Kike platform on Facebook went down a few months ago, and I've been struggling, to get it back, even though I've opened another backup page. So I apologize for those who have been sending messages in recent times. We are working towards, getting it perfected, and of course, getting maybe number of 100 people following it before we'll be able to connect to you guys live on Facebook. So many thanks again for your patience, but definitely you can watch it on your TV or your mobile phones. Technology is what we are using to drive everything that we do today. Anyway, moving away from that, sir, again, I say thank you so much for providing solutions to the issue at hand. But let me concentrate on the provisions in the reform bill, which you have constantly, elaborated on, that we should pay attention to what is important, such as those affecting free zone scheme. Because I heard yesterday when Professor Egbebade, I don't know if I pronounced the name, I can't remember now, that he emphasized on the free zone scheme, having, in terms of the criticism, he has criticized the fact that, for potential driving away or driving the investors to neighboring countries, what with Nigeria already struggling to attract and retain investment, why were these provisions introduced was one of the things that I remember him touching on yesterday. What measures can be taken now to ensure that these tax reforms, in terms of promotion or promoting the tax reform, rather than hinder it or the economic growth and will I say investor confidence. So looking at it and merging it from the angle of the foreign direct investment now that don't flow into an economic system automatically, do they also see the economy in terms of its potentials and how it's attractive enough with incentive to boost gains for any coming investor? So why the economy policymakers now is where I'm driving to, wants to make the economy vibrant, at what ratio, I ask of you, in terms of the tax to capitalize the gains, that do you think that the tax should concentrate on for the attractiveness for foreign investors?
Yes, I think engagement at the National Assembly should focus on some of these areas of concerns, because really there is no bill that is perfect. And I'm sure that the Committee on Tax Reform is not claiming that they have presented a perfect bill. There will always be room for improvement. There will always be different perspectives on issues. One major perspective from the private sector is the one that you have alluded to. That is investors in the free zones. The whole essence of the free zone is to attract investors and, where they are focused more on exports and where they also are, given almost complete tax holidays. Now, the new bill is coming up with new tax provisions for investors in the free zones. Again, we need to be very careful the way we manage that, because investment in the free zones are investment that runs sometimes into billions of dollars. And these are investments that have taken place under a particular tax regime. So if we are now changing it, we need to ensure that it doesn't disrupt or dislocate those investments. So we need to change it in a way that the shock on them will not be too drastic. Even though the chairman of the committee was saying that it's not so much about generating more revenue, but I think part of the objective is also to increase the revenue through some equity and through some efficiency in tax administration. So we need to manage that carefully, and we need to be sensitive to the concerns of investors in the free zones. That is one. Secondly, there are provisions also in the bill about progressive increase in VAT. Now, although the chairman said that some food items, health products, education products are exempted, but the reality is that the way we operate VAT in Nigeria is not the way it is operated elsewhere. VAT essentially should be a consumption tax, which you pay at the retail end of the market. But if you go to the ports now, practically all imports, most imports are subject to VAT. The port is not a marketplace, it's not a supermarket where I should be charging VAT. But that is the reality that we are faced with. And because of the informal nature of our trading, because the informal sector accounts for close to 90% of our distributive trade, there's nothing like VAT in the market. Go to Balogun, go to Jankara, or go to Okeane, or Alaba market, or Trade Fair market, wherever you go, Onisha market. You don't buy things there and people talk to you about VAT. And that is the way it is in practically all over the country. So when people are talking about consumption, about tracing it, how are you going to get the data? Because the economy is highly informal, especially trade. So these are some complications that we need to watch out for, so that we don't, in the process of trying to solve a problem, create even more challenging problems of data. Because data is a big issue in Nigeria, and it's even more so in the area of trade. So these are things that we need to be very careful about. Our economy now, a lot of businesses are under a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. This is not the time to increase VAT. even though the chairman said a lot of things have been exempted. But if you go through the tariff book, a whole lot of raw materials are subjected to VAT. A whole lot. Nobody is discussing about that. And this happens at the point of import. And I just talk about input VAT, input recovery, refund, and also those things are too complicated for the small businesses. They don't understand this process of paying the VAT, going for refund, filing this. Not many small businesses understand this process. And not many of them can even engage a tax consultant to be able to do all these computations. So we should simplify these processes as much as possible. And in the light of the pressure of the cost of production, high cost of production and all of that, we should let the VAT remain, at least for the next 1 or 2 years. Let it remain at 7.5, because the pressure arising from exchange rate issue, arising from high interest rate, arising from high cost of transportation, those pressures are enormous on business. So if we now begin to increase the VAT, it will not be good for business. So these are some areas in which I think we need to, have a review and have a rethink as we progress with the engagement on this tax reform base.
Thanks for that insight right there. And earlier, sir, when we were talking about some governors that claim that they were not adequately consulted before the rollout of these reforms. What can be done, to ensure inclusive dialogue among all stakeholders in the future? I have to take you back to this conversation because I believe that one of the qualities of successful legislation in public acceptance is how widely accepted it is. So how does the government plan to to address that widespread concerns and gain the trust of Nigerians regarding this reform, based on your perspective and the fact that the timing is one of the takeaway that I just of your last submission, the timing probably is wrong for the new reform bill that have been brought forward?
Well, on the timing, I don't think anything is wrong with the timing. Because if you look at the laws, there's many archaic laws that this bill is going to eradicate. We are talking about reducing corporate income tax for manufacturers or for companies generally, reducing it from 30% to 25%. Timing has nothing to do with that. We are talking about eradicating that are littered all over the place. The timing has nothing to do with that. So for those ones, I think there is no problem with it. In terms of the consultation, in fairness to the committee did extensive consultation. But the problem is that, first, these bills are very voluminous, they're a bit technical, and when they were having the interaction, I'm not sure people took the trouble to do some rigorous reading of those bills. If you don't read it properly, you'll not be able to engage. It's just now that they are now pushing it to the level of National Assembly. That is when people now woke up to the reality of some of those provisions. All along when these engagements were going on, I'm not sure people paid attention to those details. Because I'm aware that the committee went around the country, they met with the Governors Forum, they met with the private sector, they met with all sorts of people, but people didn't pay attention to those details because some of those provisions are, in fairness, they're a bit technical. You have to be a tax person to understand what they're actually saying. Besides, they are also a bit voluminous. We are talking of 4 bills. So if you are not a very technically sound person, you may not even understand the implications of some of the provisions unless you get an expert to read it and interpret it properly for you to be able to understand the implications of it. I think that is what had happened. And in any case, Taiwo Oyedele has said that they are ready to start another round of engagements, which is good. Of course, there's also the National Assembly platform for purposes of engagement and interrogation of some provisions in the Act. So it's not the end of engagement. It's not the end of consultation. A lot more of that can still be done. But my submission is that some glaring areas of contentions and controversy should just be stepped down. You should not push it so that we don't jeopardize the bigger components or the bigger contents of those of these tax reform bills. So that will be my submission around that.
Many thanks for that elaborate submission. The reason why I brought the issue of timing is because some of the feedback I've gotten on, different platforms online is about the timing. And of course, the timing is actually, interwoven with the economic challenges we are facing right now. Maybe hence the reason why people are using the timing. But, I agree with your submission regarding, some of the archaic things that needed to be changed. But putting that aside, how do these tax reforms align with Nigerians' long-term economic goals, particularly in reducing alliance on oil revenue and fostering a diversified economy, with concerns about a single organization managing national revenue collection? How can the government ensure transparency and accountability while avoiding concentration of power? What's your take on this? This will be my last question to you quickly before we move to the last segment.
Well, the thing is that, first of all, if efficiency improves in the tax collection system through the use of technology and making sure that people who have the capacity to pay are paying and people who have been evading tax are now paying, it will improve the revenue to government. And when revenue improves, the assumption is that it will impact on the people. And that brings me to the question of the transparency and accountability. We need to do a lot more around that, at least to show that if revenue to government improves, the people feel the impact. We have not been able to convince the people adequately that an improvement in revenue translates to improvement in the lives of the people. Now, if you take the case of the subsidy removal, we take the case of the removal of subsidy on foreign exchange, which has translated into a whole lot of improvement in revenue, which has also increased a lot of costs on the part of the citizens. We haven't seen sufficient compensation for that as a result. So these are some of the concerns that the citizens have, and these are very valid concerns. And we need to ensure that we have a framework to ensure that the benefits of an increase in revenue translate directly to the citizens. And even not only that, the government can also even give further concessions to citizens in other areas, particularly more subsidy in the area of education, more subsidy and investment in the area of health, so that as a citizen, you don't have to be compelled all the time to be looking for private institutions because the public institutions have collapsed because of lack of funding. The same thing with public transportation. You should not have a situation where everybody will be struggling to go with downfall or to put your car on the road. If there is sufficient investment in public transportation that is subsidized, you cannot run away from subsidy. If you are improving revenue, if you are taxing in some areas, you should give subsidy back in some other areas. So that is what I think should happen, rather than taking subsidy away completely from maybe university education and all of that. I think we should give some reasonable subsidy. Not everybody can apply for the loan and get it. This is a very huge population. So if we subsidize that, we subsidize public transportation, we subsidize agriculture, we subsidize so many things. That way the citizen will feel direct impact. If you also reduce import duty on some critical things, the citizen will feel it directly. But not everything is about revenue. If you are making revenue from one side, you give back concession in some other areas, both to the individuals and to businesses. This is the way I think we should go, so that the citizens can feel the impact, so that we can also ensure more accountability, with respect to some of this revenue that is likely to arise as a result of efficiency in tax administration.
Many thanks for all your submission thus far. It's been an enlightening one with you. But quickly, before I let you go, there's the last segment of the show that I call Trending Stories. I know you're familiar with it because you're a regular guest on this show. Is one of the trending stories that caught our attention as Nigerians, as Africans, is the fact that Godwin Emefiele allegedly owns the large estate in Abuja with 753 duplexes, that has been falsified to Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, that's the EFCC. And this is where I have an opinion as a host, and the story surrounding this former CBN governor Emefiele, and the confiscation of the 753 duplexes is both shocking and deeply saddening, if you ask me. Yet it's a mirror of the reflection in the tragic reality of corruption in Nigeria today. Here was a man, allegedly, again, let me put it out there because the news is still being uncovered, but it is near to a fact that his name is behind it, as EFCC has traced the ownership to him, and like I was saying earlier, this is a celebrated man for his academic qualifications, high-ranking positions, now remembered not for his contribution or achievement, but for his greed and entanglement in corruption. Under his tenure, inflation hits an 18-year record high of almost 23%, and the country's debt profile, soared to more than, $150 billion. Also a record that I must say that was more than 3 times the debt level for the previous government. So what legacy is this really? This institution raises profound questions about our collective moral compass, if you ask me, in terms of the devastating effects of corruption in our country or in our nation. If one individual can accumulate such an obscene amount of wealth through illicit means, what does this say about the system and the safeguards in place? Because I'm trying to understand it. It's guys, gone are the days, where you work in an environment, and when you drive certain cars, like I was discussing with my husband, and you live certain lifestyle, you will be questioned if you work in an organization that they feel that the money that you are being paid is more than your lifestyle. But all of that has been thrown under the carpet today. What does it imply about the collective mentality of those in power? Corruption has penetrated every layer of governance, draining resources meant to serve the people and worsening poverty and insecurity and underdevelopment. The sheer scale of this estate, 753 duplexes, begs the question that I want to ask right now. How many homes can one person occupy at once? What is the purpose of such massive accumulation in a world where life is fleeting? I don't know. Somebody should give me answers to this question, because the vanity of amassing wealth, power, properties at the extent of others, suffering is a sovereign reminder of our foolishness in this country, Nigeria, especially with our leaders. I'm sorry, I have to keep it real on this platform today. I keep it real all the time, but today it's irritating. You will see a man dying and families are fighting over inheritance. Leaders are clutching in onto material possession at the end of it, or none of it will be taken to heaven. What really matters is not what we acquire on it, but what we leave behind. On this platform, we talk about on this day in history every now and then. Now, Emefiele's qualification, which used to be a source of pride, have been outshined by his greed. How will history remember us is what I'm bringing to fore today. These opportunities to uplift others or those who exploited and betrayed the trust placed in us. Honestly, our leaders, or will I say the leadership or our leadership crisis, stem from the fundamental flaws, from the early stages of governance, from the values, from integrity, talk about service, accountability, have been overlooked in favor of personal enrichment. Leaders are products of our society. And if corruption thrives unchecked at every level, it's inevitable that it seeps into positions of power. That's the truth. Institutions like EFCC must be impartial and fearless in pursuing justice like this. whether dealing with big thieves or small thieves, whatever thieves you want to, curb it as. The selective justice have highlighted that Insure's critique damages public trust. And that's the reason why I must put it out there today that I, for one, I love Sahara reporting. Because all other media stations, I'm sorry, I have to keep it real right now. They are inflated with one person or the other who is still in the corridor of power. I don't want to mention any institution, right? Any media institution. But that's the honest truth. But when you see Sahara reporting, they say it as it is without bias. For goodness sake, how can one man, honestly, and even though, yes, EFCC has recovered all of this, I would like to know how they are going to use these properties afterwards. Because it's not about us just recovering all these properties anymore. What is it going to be used for? Who is it going to service? What value is it going to add to health, to education, many other sectors like that? I think that it's important for us to start bringing that to fore. Because every time we hear about, EFCC have done this, EFCC have done, what do they use those things for in terms of how to add value to the citizens of Nigerians? It's so unfortunate, but enough is enough with our leaders. What kind of country, what kind of legacy are you leaving behind? Sir, what's your contribution on this topic? I'm sure you must have seen it on socials.
Yeah, Kike, Kike, I agree fully with what you have said. I think I don't have any other thing to add other than to say that I agree with your position, and I appreciate your concern, your emotions about this, because this is about our country. This is about leadership. This is about integrity. This is about credibility of leaders. Because no matter what we say, if we don't get it right with the character of leadership, character is perhaps everything. No matter what you say, your policies, if the character is not there, you cannot get anywhere. And that is part of the reason that has brought us to this place. So I agree with you. We need to collectively continue to work to ensure that we have people of character, that will hold people to account. We need to ensure that there are consequences for action. But more importantly, in our leadership selection process, we should also put a lot more premium on the quality of character. Of course, competence is good, capacity is good, but character is also extremely, very, very important, so that we don't end up with this kind of situation. And this is not the only situation. I'm sure there are many more. It's just that once you have this kind of revelation, these are the ones we see. There are many more that we have not seen. So it's a responsibility for us collectively as citizens to ensure that we place a lot more premium on character when it comes to leadership positions. So thank you very much. I appreciate your emotions and your concern. But that is the way to go. We need to make our nation great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for creating time to be on the show. Yeah. And of course, we've had an interesting time with you, courtesy you are a resourceful guest, Dr. Muda Yusuf, and the former DG, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I want to wish you the very best as you continue to lend your voice on issues that affect us all. And I wish for you wisdom and longevity in navigating different human behaviors that you will meet in the corridor of your career path. Thank you so much again for creating time to be here, Dr. Muda Yusuf.
Yeah, thank you, Kike.
On this note, this is where I draw the curtains of the show. Remember that you can catch me tomorrow on Inspiration FM 92.3, your drive time radio talk show. And before you see me on Thursday, please be kind to one another and put a smile on somebody's face. Bye now.